Welcome to Empower Humans.
Welcome to the Empower Humans podcast. This is episode 38, our interview with the head of Rebel for a Change, ASPEN LUZIER. This woman is an amazing soul and a great example to all of us, really making a positive change in whatever areas you're striving for. In her particular case, it's addictions and those affected and surrounding someone who might be experiencing addiction in their life. We talked a little bit in this episode about what I always remind you, our valued audience, of, which are two things. Number one, you are priceless and you are never alone. We talk a little bit about that more in this interview, and I want to also remind you of our challenges that we always give our audience. Number one, study. Keep studying if you have been. Start studying if you haven't been. Learn, grow, read, develop. That's what this is all about. You can do that through Audible. Audible sponsors our podcast. They're actually offering our listeners, that's you, a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/empowerhumans. That's audibletrial.com/empowerhumans all together, and browse their unmatched selection of audio programs. You get a free audiobook, and I've been going through more than a book a week as part of kind of my own New Year's resolution this year, and so far so good. I think I just started my 54th book, so I'm a little ahead of myself. It's November at the time of this recording. I'm currently listening to 3 books to kind of break it up a little bit, but one of them is called Fast Food Genocide, all about these processed foods we eat. Some of that may tie into this topic of addiction that we'll be talking about in this interview today. Another book is called The Collapse of Parenting, a great book for any parent or kid or whatever it might be. Everyone knows about parenting and is the product of parents. So this book, I think, applies to everybody. There's lots of great parenting books out there as well. And the third book I'm listening to right now is called 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. And there's other great biographies, autobiographies, rock stars, all these things you can learn about. Whatever is of importance and value to you, you can learn about through Audible. So take advantage of their offer, get a free audiobook, and continue on with their service. audibletrial.com/empowerhumans. The second of the 3 challenges is keep making great moments with your loved ones. Love them as a verb, an action word. Surprise someone, make an impact. All these things will overshadow any regrets you may have in your life for the most part. And the last thing is, let's keep doing this podcast together. I'm so excited to bring this interview to you. And without further ado, enjoy this interaction that we had about Rebel for a Change, ASPEN LUZIER and her organization, and some great insights also that she provided about being the wife of a rock star. So enjoy it. How you doing? This is Phil.
I am so good. I've been anticipating this call. How are you?
I'm good too. I'm already recording, by the way. If anything goes wrong, we'll edit this out. But
okay. Awesome.
We've had some messages back and forth. This is our first real, conversation. So
I know, and you've been so extremely patient with me, which I'm incredibly grateful for, because Rebel has really taken a quicker launch than I thought was going to happen. So I'm just very appreciative for everybody who takes that into consideration.
Yeah, that's great. And anything taking a quicker launch is usually a good thing, but that can be overwhelming, I imagine, too. Your time gets busy. So
yeah, it's really awesome, because where I thought I would have been overwhelmed, this is a life I've been living all of my existence. So it's been the language I've been speaking, and now just to be able to generate this language to a broader community who needs it, it just feels right.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, when you feel right, you feel like you're on the right path. There's nothing like that, because a lot of people, sometimes get lost and don't necessarily feel like they're necessarily doing what they're supposed to do yet. So I think that could be inspiring for people. Now, and as our audience may know, we interviewed your husband here a couple weeks ago, and if you're listening to this and you don't know that, then go back and listen to that, because and for those who don't know, her husband is Ray LUZIER, and your name is Aspen, also LUZIER, but and now Ray is the drummer for Korn and all that, and I want to get into this whole thing about Rebel for a Change, because I think it's incredible and amazing and awesome what you're doing. I had 2 quick questions, kind of as a appendage to my interview with Ray, and one of those is, I understand he came back into town recently, that he's on tour, and so what is that like from your end with that whole thing? And again, just real quick, and then I want to get into this Rebel for a Change. But what is that like?
Yeah. We've been together, it's going on 10 years now. We have 2 children, so life is chaotic. Our kids are still small and very dependable on mommy and daddy, which has been mommy a lot lately. And so juggling it is interesting, but being that we've done this for 10 years, it just sort of goes with the nature of what we do now. And the kids are really understanding of it because that's all they know.
Yeah.
But, it's really cool because when I met Ray, I was doing modeling and acting and living in that world, and soon became a mom and did that and was house mom and wife, and I enjoyed that. But this is the first time Ray's ever really been able to see me as I don't know, a boss and like a businesswoman and making very quick, swift judgment calls. And it's neat for me for him to see me in this light now, because he's never seen this side of me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
He's been very patient with me because, and as I have been with him.
Sure. But
he's really allowing me to take the reins right now and just do what I feel is best in the sense of Rebel, and not feeling like he's got to hold me back, which is really nice because, being the other side of our relationship, I've really been there for him. So it's really nice to see him reciprocate that respect back to me.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys both flourishing in your own right with what you're trying to do. And I think you guys are a great example of largely what a couple should be. I mean, clearly I'm not super privy to everything in your family and your marriage, but I see you from a distance, and I see you guys make sacrifices and take care of each other and all that. So
absolutely. It's cool because Ray has his audience that really connects and speaks with him, and he inspires so many individuals.
Sure. And
where I've now been able to find my journey and take my path and do it on my scale and my spectrum. It's neat to see how we're both inspiring others to try to be better people and try to make the change for yourself, where nobody else can do it for you. Right.
Yeah, and I think that's, you got, like I said, great example, and I'm glad that you're finding your way to balance this all out, because a lot of the world doesn't know what that's like, because most of us, I'm a musician, but I don't travel the world like he does. So I think that's a good kind of insight for some of our audience to say, oh, okay, because they don't know what that's like.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It is hard.
Sure.
And every day, it's a constant battle to try to reach each other on the phone and have a meaningful conversation, and it doesn't always happen. And I think the biggest thing right now with our children being so small is just trying not to allow that difficulty to reflect on our kids and still be present for them in any way possible, shape that we can, while still juggling our marriage and our business and our brand. Just making sure that our kids don't feel, the stress that can come from that, because it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can only imagine. But now, on one hand, is it kind of cool to be able to say, "Oh, my husband is this big drummer for Korn and all that," versus, "Oh, he's an accountant or something." No offense to the accountants out there.
He's going to hear this, so I'm very brutally honest. In the very beginning, it was. I thought, being in the modeling world, I'm like, oh, I'm dating this rock star. I'm like a completely different person where none of that means anything to me.
Yeah.
And I think I highly respect what he does and what he has built from the ground up, what he's done for himself. But, throwing ego aside and all of that, I just see him as my husband, and what he does, he's like that's a different life almost.
Yeah. And people are just people. I've lived in LA, and I got to know various types of celebrities and stuff here and there, and it's just, when it gets down to the rest of the world, I grew up in New Mexico, And there's not a lot of that there, not a lot of anything.
Yeah,
no offense, anyone in New Mexico. But
right.
for those of us who didn't grow up around that, and Ray certainly didn't, he's a farm boy, but you start to realize, oh, it's just people who worked real hard, some luck and all that, and doing whatever it is they're doing, and good for them to have whatever success they've had and whatever it is, acting, music, whatever. So, but anyway,
Right.
I mean, thanks for opening up on that part of your life, because I think that kind of helps people kind of understand you and your perspective and kind of where you are at this particular stage where you're bringing this thing forth, this Rebel for a Change. And tell me a little bit about this Rebel for a Change, if you would, as far
Absolutely.
as what is it and why? Why is that your cause?
Yeah. So, goodness, for most of my young life, addiction was very prevalent as a child, watching it. Watching my stepmother struggle through very hard drugs, getting off the school bus in second grade, and having to watch her sleep to make sure she was still breathing while my father was at work. And in that time, my father was sober. He battled alcoholism, and I would go to AA meetings with him. And so it was my normal, and I knew it wasn't everybody's normal, but that's just what I was raised around and comfortable, I guess, for the most part with. But then I realized how I watched my dad suffer back and fall back in the grasps of addiction. And while him and I were trying to help my stepmother, goodness, this was second grade, when we were trying to help her, I realized she wasn't responding to the help because she wasn't ready to be there. So she wasn't ready to become clean and, face her demons. So fast forward into my adolescent years, I too started partying and drinking and doing things because that's what I saw and was comfortable with. And socially, I just adapted into that. And then fast forward into my mid-20s, I met Ray, and I just realized that's not what I really wanted. Ray's never done a drug in his life, and he was somebody who I felt like I really needed to be honest for myself to really give this person a good go and move forward with a relationship that I really wanted. Not that I was doing anything that was, an addictive. I didn't have an addictive personality towards these drugs, but it was something I was definitely dabbling in and knew that it was wrong. So now, fast forward into I'm a mother, and seeing my father really fall into the grasps of addiction. Let's just say I had a good perspective on all angles, on being the child of somebody battling with addiction, to then dabbling in it myself and realizing where that would lead you, to then marrying somebody who's never been there before, and just seeing really all of the angles and where it could lead your life. And when my father suffered, he started doing crystal meth. I did everything in my power to be there for him. We would get phone calls of him threatening to commit suicide, to threatening to, oh goodness, I don't know if I should say this one. Let's just not go that. I don't want to go too deep with where he is on his personal life. But
okay.
My father found himself in a really bad place, and I was trying everything in my power to be there for him, and realizing in doing that, my husband was on tour all the time. We had 2 small children, and there was this void. Ray didn't understand, not having ever dealt with addiction or ever going down, drugs in his life. He didn't understand the compassion that I still had for my father. so him and our marriage started suffering. I started suffering as a mother and a friend because I had nowhere to go with trying to fill this void of my father not being who I remembered him to be, and having to try to be there for him, and realizing that my heart was the only one that was truly breaking, because unfortunately it was the drug that was allowing him to act and say the things that he did with not having any kind of like internal repercussions. So I started drinking at night. I'd put my kids to bed, and I would sit in front of the computer. I owned a photography business at the time, and I started drinking again, and to the point where I would be nearly a bottle down every single night, going to bed at like 2 a.m., just crying, hurting, not being able to understand and identify why, but just feeling very alone, and that nobody could understand me and where I was at. But then who do you talk to when you're the one who loves an addict? Because, you know, there's not too many support groups, and the ones that there were or there are out, I just felt very uncomfortable going into a room full of strangers to talk about my story and my journey. So I just sheltered my emotions and my feelings, and it got to a point where I realized I was going to soon be walking down the same footsteps as where my father has found himself if I didn't get my act together. So I walked into a boxing gym, and I needed something to really hit me hard. I would go into that gym every single day, and I would have a hoodie on and a hat, and I would go in there and try to like not allow anybody to see me, and conceal just everything that I was feeling. But the second I got behind that bag, I would just start bawling while hitting it, and allowing, like, I didn't understand at that time what was happening. I just knew what I needed. So when doing that and trying to get myself back into a better mental state, because what was happening is I was going under a depression, getting myself back into a mental state of clarity allowed me to be like, you know what, I'm about to lose my marriage. I'm not the same mother I was. I've lost many of my friends, and I don't even know who I am anymore, and I need to talk to somebody because I'm, like, hurting. So I went to social media and spoke about my father's addiction and how it started to get a grasp on me, and finding boxing as my therapy. Not drinking anymore, and I just spoke, and then I realized how many people messaged me within hours, like the first hour, direct messaged me of just, thank you for your honesty, and thank you for being real and putting your heart on your sleeve, because I am going through this too, and I don't know where to go. And the first person who messaged me where I realized that there is something here, there's something that needs to be done here, was a woman wrote me, and she said, I'm a nurse, and I had back surgery, and I can no longer afford medicine, so I am now taking heroin to mask the pain. And I want to thank you for being a voice to my children. And at that point, I was just like, something has to be done. Because those kids could easily go down the same path I did. And that's where my heart was really breaking.
Wow.
So trying to sum that up.
No, yeah. I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, and it's something that clearly there's a lot that's built up in form of, whether we say tension and sadness and whatever it all is, and that those forces can be destructive, as we've all seen by this stage of our lives, or you can do something constructive with it. And it sounds like that's the path that you've gotten on, at least at this point too. It sounds like there were some destructive aspects early on as well. But
absolutely, yeah, there was. And to be able to own up to it and realize my faults and where they were stemming from.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I want Rebel to be able to step in, and we're on the early stages of this, but to create, let's be proactive, let's be active in the sense of creating empowerment for the adults, but how can we be proactive so these little children who see it like I did don't go down the same path?
Right, right.
How do we create this program, this mentorship, to help these kids and give these kids childhoods that maybe they might not get, or maybe they might not have because they're trying to be the adult in the situation, or they've seen addiction so clearly in their childhood where, it's easy for them to, I'm just going to dabble in it because, I've seen my parents go through it and they're fine, for the most part. But, it was, I'm grateful to have been able to have my kids because I realized that, I have nothing who I want to prove something to is them. And they were the ones who allowed me to see clearly.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's no better motivator in the world than kids. I mean, regardless of anyone's belief system, clearly, whether there's a design to all this, we're not going to argue all that in this call, but I personally believe there is, but the greatest incentive in the world, and I, as a general rule, I believe the people that we love, whether it's in an intimate relationship, parents, siblings, and your own children of all things, are incentive or can be for us to become our best selves as well. At least that's
right.
One of the reasons I believe those people exist in our world. It's not just we come to a planet and we're by ourselves. There's people that we love. And
right.
Let me ask you this, Aspen, if you don't mind me asking, do you have siblings also?
I have a stepbrother and I have a half-sister, and they weren't introduced into my life until I was older,
okay.
So it was hard to really connect with them. So really I felt like an only child for most of my childhood.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting as I listened to Ray talk about his, growing up on the farm, there's a lot of basically kind of, no offense, Ray, being a little naive to an extent, just because he was kind of sheltered. Not in the sense of that's who he is, but he just didn't.
Right.
Yeah, that's all he knew. I mean, and you're fortunate in the rock star world that he's a guy who's, and he and I have chatted about this offline a little bit too, about that he just never decided to pick up a drug or anything like that. And a lot of these, like I said, I'm a musician. I've seen it, and I personally don't myself either. But I grew up playing music in a garage too. Just kind of comparing backgrounds slightly. I didn't deal with addiction like you did in your family. But
right.
Smoke-filled garages and all that. And that's just cigarettes, but that's addiction too, and then other things that people dabble in. But and that really played a huge part in him and I suffering for a good year. It was tough because, trying to understand that people who battle with addiction, yes, it's their choice in the beginning to say, I'm going to do this, and this is where people can, go back and forth, but, it is a disease, and once it has a hold of you, and people often choose a drug because they're trying to mask something else, but regardless, it was very hard for him to understand that, first of all, but then I also understand, gosh, how can your father say these absolutely horrific things to you and you still want to be there for him? Yeah.
Because it's having the compassion for the addict and having the compassion of who you know that they can be and who you know that they are deep and down inside and what you know that they can get back to. So it was very hard on our marriage for him because he didn't want to see me get hurt. And I can understand that. But I think for Rebel, our mission is to raise awareness for the loved ones walking alongside the individuals battling addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much we can change the way today's society views addiction by hearing the ones who love an addict.
Yeah.
Instead of placing our judgment on addiction by watching these people do and say horrible things, let's hear it from a loving side. Because we all know addiction is terrible, and everything that stems off of it can become very horrific.
Yeah.
But let's try to look at it from a compassionate side, because what we've been doing isn't working. So how can we try to change the mold and change the spectrum to allow people to visualize it different? And maybe, you know what really makes me extremely frustrated?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, if it's, what is it, Dr. Phil? It's one of those TV shows where they have an intervention with the addict, and they televise this, where this person is hurting, and they're hurting for very personal reasons. Who knows what their childhood was about? Who knows? But the fact that today's society was like, oh yeah, we're going to put money into this television show so we can make money off of putting these people on the spot when they're already hurting very bad, and then we're going to just everybody be angry towards them and hope that we can have this intervention and change them and, whip them back into shape. But it's just like, people watch this, and it's just very heartbreaking when you look at it from a compassionate angle.
Yeah.
But that's just my personal opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, your opinion is of value, and you're in an even more authoritative place now because you have this this organization. So your opinion matters, and clearly your opinion has its own authority because you have this life experience also. And when you talk about some of your own personal struggles, and I appreciate that you laid out kind of a whole panoramic picture sort of your life as it involves this topic, because you kind of talk about some ups and downs and things that went on at different stages. But how does this whole thing play in, do you think? Because it sounds like there's a vicious cycle that takes place, kind of a repetitive cycle amongst generations where, like in your case, you started getting into certain things. And was that something that you kind of were drawn to because this is what you were experiencing and seeing? Or do you feel like there is, I mean, clearly scientifically they say these things they kind of run in families a little bit too. But do you want to comment more on that as far as the vicious cycle part? That's what I think is interesting about what you're doing too, because we do focus on the addict, but again, what about everything surrounding? There's maybe hundreds or even thousands of people affected in some capacity around the zillions of individuals who are the actual addicts. And so from the child's perspective, I know that's a long question, but what would you like to say about any of that?
Yeah, I know. That question was like, there's a lot to be said right there. So with Rebel for Change, this is not, I wasn't planning on starting a nonprofit with my journey. It became a conversation piece that allowed me to realize there were so many people like myself that had nowhere to go and were starting to fall in a bad mental state, which then led to self-mutilation, cutting, to deal with their pain of watching their loved one. They started falling into addiction themselves, like I was. There was so much that was happening to the ones who loved an addict. So that is where I began, was like, oh my gosh, this is insanity. Like, there's so many people who, let's just say Al-Anon, which is an incredible program that stems off of AA, and they have a 12-step program which works for people. But for me, that wasn't my comfortability. My comfortability, oddly enough, was to be heard on a larger spectrum, where I realized by sharing my pain and sharing my vulnerability and sharing where I was falling, and just laying it all on the table, allowed other individuals to find light it shed light. It just basically put a spotlight on what was happening, and allowed other people to realize, who loved an addict or somebody even recovering, like, this could be my journey. And it just sort of like put an alert up for people to understand that not only the person who's struggling with the addiction needs recovery, but the individuals who love them need recovery too. And they need a place to talk to, or a place to talk. So in the beginning of Rebel, it was creating awareness. So how do we do that? How do we bring this community together and create awareness, and then also give these individuals something substantial to allow them to see that they can find the light within themselves to make the change.
Right.
So that was the beginning. But then I worked with an individual who helped me realize why I was really hurting. So let's strip the ego. Let's strip the anger. Let's strip all of that stuff, because, you know, you're so angry when you love an addict because you feel helpless. And there's so many things that are said and done to you where you're just like, well, here we go again. Now what?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of anger that started with the beginning of it. But to strip all of that aside and realize, okay, where are we really hurting? Where am I really hurting? And I realized it was the children. It was the children that broke my heart, that didn't have the tools to know what to do with these emotions. And they didn't understand what these emotions even meant, which then, bring them to their adolescent years, in which we discussed that. And then we're going to get really on a personal note here, but I've shared this before, so I feel confident sharing it now. But when Jonathan Davis, his wife, Devin Davis, passed away, it really hit home. He's been open with her death, so I'm not going to touch on that, but it allowed me to challenge Rebel in the sense of, okay, what are you going to do, Rebel? What are you going to do, Aspen, in this situation where this happens time and time again, and these children, are left with not having a mother now? Sorry. So that's where I realized that Rebel has to be more than just a statement, empowerment, bringing healing. We have to change the way we allow our children to be raised in these types of situations.
Yeah.
So taking that and trying to create a mentorship around that for these children, to have somebody. I even speaking to another woman who, her husband, he's in recovery, and her little boys, all they wanted was Daddy to sit and watch a football game with them. And to provide these children with, a male figure that could do these things that maybe mommy is just in their head, just not, not the right fit, not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To give these children something, a solid person in their life that they can just sort of have fun with. So I sort of went off of your question, but
no, it's your answer is perfect. It was a very long question, but first and foremost, I want to be clear too. And for those who don't know, Jonathan Davis is the singer for Korn, and incredible talent, incredible artist, and it tears me up. And I don't know him personally, but it tears me up when I saw this myself. I was like, oh no. And it happened to be, this is amongst a more famous circle, and it happens in not so famous circles, as you've pointed out too. But our condolences to him and his kids and family. What we do from here, that I think you said that was so important. What does Rebel do with this? Because this hit very, very close to home for you, because this is, this is part of your husband's, what he does and all of that too. and he works with this person, for all intents and purposes. They're co-workers, so to speak. But what do we do from here is some of what I'm hearing there from you, as far as, and this is a general thing in life, what do we do with situations as far as, is this a stumbling block? Is this a stepping stone? Can we do something to at least take this situation and make it something positive and impactful in that way? And so that's, and you talk about the children, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've got 2 boys myself. Ray and I have talked a little about this, comparing notes, raising boys, and it's just, when you have kids, everything changes too, that perspective. And he's got these kids, he's now got to shift gears with this having happened. And
too, it's like everybody's journey is different. And unfortunately, in this world, there is no answer. It's not like we can just supply like an individual with X, Y, and Z and the problem is solved. So people just need to also be very open-minded that with Rebel, we can give you as much as we possibly can in the sense of empowerment and coming to events and uniting this community to make you feel that you're not alone, because you're not, and your voice matters because it does, and give you validation. But you also have to do the work. You have to show up for yourself to try to get to the other side. You have to, and I mean, that's with recovery. And even an addict, you have to do the work to get to the other side.
Yeah, and I love that you say that too, because I mean, even in our podcast, I always tell our audience 2 things: you are priceless, and you are not alone. And I want people to just let that sink in, because so many people get lost thinking something which is absolutely not true, that they're not priceless, in some cases far from it, or even worthless, and that they are alone. And nothing could be further from the truth. So you can be kind of a pillar of light, as other people and organizations for various things can be as well, letting people know that they aren't alone. And that is probably, if nothing else, one of the biggest impacts you can have here, because people being alone is a lot of times what draws them in, it sounds like to me, to these addictions or other destructive behaviors.
Exactly. It allows it to stem to something damaging.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've had so many individuals just really pour their heart out, and what has happened to them within their journey of being the child of an addict, being the wife, husband of an addict, being an addict themselves and recovering, and now seeing it from the other side. And a lot of these individuals feel like, those dark moments, they're useless, and it doesn't. There's no voice to that. But what I want to try to help people understand is to, as hard as it is, embrace it, because it sculpted you to be the strong individual you are today. And because of those moments, you have a world of knowledge to give other people that are looking for help, who are in the same situation that you have been in. Yeah.
I love that empowerment side of what you're doing. That all feeds off the idea of you're not alone, and this kind of this bigger picture of it all. And if you don't mind me asking also, on that kind of that note of where some of these things come from, because you talked a little bit about your dad, what is that background, if you don't mind me asking? Is there anything there from his childhood, from his life and beyond, from the previous generations that may have contributed, or genetically? I can't speak too much to all of that, but did he experience that?
He had a very hard childhood. And on the addiction side of things, I don't think that his family struggled with it, but I know that things happened where he never faced it. And probably what started out as social drinking turned into something more. And then he had demons within inside that he didn't speak about. And I think it added to his addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, I will say this, because I did throw out crystal meth in there, and it goes with the whole opioid episode that's going on right now.
Yeah.
So, man, it was tough. It was a hard day when I knew something was deeper with my dad than what he was wanting to share. And it finally came to a head where he felt confident within me to tell me what was really going on. But he was battling being on oxycodone for 20 years. And he was trying to get off of it, but the pain of trying to sustain the withdrawals was so overbearing that he tried to take another drug to get him off of the oxys. So crystal meth was the other drug to mask the pain of the withdrawals, which, from what I was told, the crystal meth only lasted for a very short amount of time, but regardless of the personal part of it, it's just hard because these people who are battling addiction, they don't want to be there.
No,
they're hurting and they're trying. Whether the outside of society can see that they're trying, but and whatever choices they're making might not be like what we would imagine being a good alternative, because I know when he told me that, I was like, you've lost your mind, because that's not okay. But who am I to say what's right and wrong in his defense, where he was at? I have no idea what he was feeling internally, so who am I to judge?
Well, and that becomes kind of a vicious cycle, too. You talk about he went to meth as an escape from the withdrawal from other things, and so there's this kind of this ugly thing that just keeps recycling itself in one form or another, whether it's this or that. And then I think of these previous generations. We just talked a little bit about that. We talk about the greatest generation, World War II, for example. Probably our grandparents, more or less, and yet all these guys. My grandfather was in the Navy. They come back, and a lot of them are traumatized, and we didn't have any comprehension of what we now call post-traumatic stress syndrome and or disorder, and the various things that take place. So I think in some capacity, people didn't really know how to cope. I mean, a lot of these folks came out of the Great Depression. They were just trying to survive, just physically stay alive for the most part. And so there weren't a lot of coping mechanisms in place. And I hear stories both related to my grandparents and others that they just had pain and they didn't know what to do. And it's, lo and behold, alcohol or some other thing dulled some of that pain. And so they kind of turned to that. But do you think there's kind of, maybe in our society, is there sort of an embarrassment if somebody's going through pain? Not that that's all that causes addiction, but it feeds into it clearly. Is there kind of an embarrassment culture that, oh, I can't go ask for help, or there's a stigma around mental health?
Yeah, because unfortunately, people view vulnerability for asking for help as a weakness.
Yeah.
Where that's one of Rebel's core values, because you have to have vulnerability to get to the other side. You have to be vulnerable to get to that pivotal moment internally to make the change.
Right.
You can't do it alone. And there's so many people out there who would love to be vulnerable and don't know how, and just need the guidance to know that it's okay. Because, our society has trained us to don't talk about it. So then there's the shame and the stigma, and that follows the family members too. And that's why I went down, going into alcoholism, because we live in a very prim and proper neighborhood. And so what is that going to look like for my kids? What is that going to look like for Ray? What is that, how is my dad's drug addiction, how will that reflect on us? What are other people going to think? Where, none of that matters, because everybody's struggling in one way or another. And if we can all just let our guard down a little bit and take it easy. Like, yeah.
I kind of know that's great points. I wonder if there's a way in our culture that we can change the approach, the mindset that not only should we not be embarrassed, but we ought to encourage people to speak up about their feelings and whatever it is that they...
Exactly. And that's what I tell people is embrace it. Embrace the pain, because that's the moment that once you do that and you accept it and you share it and you see how many people are there for you, cheering you on to help you get to the other side, that's when the pivotal moments happen, not for only you, but the community. And that's how Rebel, that's how I realized that, wow, there's something more here, is embracing it, sharing it, owning it, and then empowering and igniting it from that point on.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it weren't for the pain, Rebel would not have been fueled the way that it was. I was hurting so bad that nothing was stopping me. So instead of becoming the victim through pain, I became like the empowerer through pain. So if people can just change their mindset a little bit, instead of feeling like you're a victim, because you're not, just change perception a little bit.
Yeah, I think about what you're saying about embrace the pain. One of my favorite quotes, by the way, Tony Robbins said that what you link to pleasure and what you link to pain will determine your destiny. And I thought about that. I was like, that's one of the most profound things I've ever heard. Like if you whether it's related to addiction, drugs and whatnot, or eating and exercise, or what you do with your career or not, it's if you find pleasure, hopefully in good things, even though there might be pain associated, for example, with exercising or getting off drugs, it's what we associate with that. And that's such a key psychological thing, because I've personally been going through lots of books myself, and you learn a few things here and there about psychology and how we associate and frame things in life. And so when people's pain is like a necessary part of life, yet we don't want to talk about it, but we have commercials galore about, Aleve and Tylenol, and then there's these harder, everything's about avoiding pain. But when you talk about embrace the pain, what a powerful statement, Aspen. I can't even begin to say how powerful that is, because embracing the pain is the first step to actually deal with it in a healthy manner, don't you think? I mean, so
it's pretty awesome, honestly, to be able to strip away everything that I ever knew and to really hone in on my emotions and what stemmed from that. And I realized in the, year and a half sculpting Rebel that I felt most inspired in my most hurtful moments and my most painful moments is when I grew the most. So,
of course,
why are we teaching our society to mask that and not talk about that? Because there's something so powerful when you can just own up to it and see the amount of people that can feed off of that.
Yeah. And it's not just embrace the pain, it's almost embrace the pain with hope that here's pain, but guess what? We don't need to run from it. We don't need to mask it with drugs, alcohols, shooting something in our arm or whatever it might be. We can have hope of a better way that's actually more permanent. Like I think about, I used to do yard work and pulling out the weeds, pulling it out by the root, and it's easier said than done. I know that. I've had my share of pain and trauma in my life. We all have in some capacity, but pulling it out by the root, and that there's hope that we can do that, figuratively speaking, with whatever these pains are. With your father's situation, you almost have to look at him like that little child that went through whatever he went through, not just this is the man who's put you through pain, because probably at his core he didn't want to, but he didn't know how to handle this. He didn't know how to. I can't speak for everybody. People have their different reasons, but how we're handling pain and what we link to these things is such a powerful statement, I think, overall. Now you talked earlier about the boxing. I want to touch back on that for a second. How important is it to have something like that as a relief and a kind of release, better word, for this inner tension and pain and maybe go ahead.
It's incredibly important. You have to, as an individual, when you have so much built up inside and you don't know where to go with it, you have to find what it is that's going to make you okay and bring you back to normalcy and ground you. It was the only thing that allowed me to fight what could have been alcoholism. Mm-hmm. I believe that whether it's art or it's yoga or for me boxing, mm-hmm. whatever the case may be, it's what allows you to show up for yourself and to give yourself self-love and self-endurance, because you need that, and it's therapy, and in any sense, you take something back from that. And it's something that nobody else can do for you, which I think is really important for everybody to experience. What you get for showing up for yourself, nobody can gift you that. And to experience it and to feel it firsthand, nothing else compares to it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you elaborating on that, because there's a ton to be said for that, for having an outlet. Because otherwise, things build up. It's almost like physics. Things build up. Tension builds up. This is real. It's not just, you talk about physics of pressure building up in a pipe or something. The very same type of thing happens in people. So if you can let it out in a healthy manner, boxing or playing music, that was something for me. I mentioned I actually play drums too, and that I grew up with some anger and things in my family and so on and so forth. And I got to beat the hell out of these drums. And sure enough, that became a release where I wasn't beating the heck out of someone at school or some other unhealthy thing that maybe I'd end up in jail. And people do that too. And so that's why we have to find these. That's why I ask you about that, because these healthy outlets, it just sounds like such a, like, not just important, but indispensable part of this process.
Absolutely. And for the boxing, it's not even for the physical. Like, it's not even what happens to your body and like the physical shape. It's what happens internally. And I think that's for anything. For you playing drums, or for somebody sitting in, if therapy, if someone's going and talking to their therapist, if that's their outlet, or planting flowers, whatever it may be, it's what happens internally, and you have to go through it to really to feel it and understand it. Yeah.
And how important is it for this whole idea of honesty? Because again, all this has to do with running from something. It sounds a lot like, for the most part, in a lot of cases at least, it has to do with running from pain, running from something perhaps. How important is it to just put on the brakes and just, this is what it is. This is who I am, and I have to be honest with what this has become.
Yeah, you have to. You have to be honest. You have to be vulnerable. You have to just face your demons to give yourself a fair shot to make it to the other side of making a change. Because if you're masking while you're fighting, if you're masking while your heart breaks, even if you're masking it to yourself, let alone a conversation piece to your friends, if you can't be honest with yourself on an anonymous level, then, I mean, it's just like with addiction. If you're not ready to face it, you're not gonna beat it.
Yeah, yeah, great points. I think about your organization here, and what are some of the specific kinds of things that you're trying to do, or the initiatives and even fundraising efforts for this particular cause?
Yeah, so my goodness, what it started out to be is what it is today is crazy to me. What it initially was going to be was we were just going to make empowerment pieces, such as bracelets. That goes back to where my dad and I, 6 years ago, we made a bracelet, and we were going to mass produce them and sell them and give money back to a charity. And that never happened. But I always kept a hold of this bracelet, and it was very special to me because him and I handmade it. So the day that I spoke openly about my father, I was on a mission to change the world. And I say that with no joking aside, I am going to change the face of addiction and allow the people of love an addict to be heard.
Yeah.
So the day I spoke about that, I didn't know how I was going to do this, and opened up a drawer just to grab a charger and saw that bracelet literally staring up at me. And I picked it up and held it in the palm of my hand, and I was like, this is it. This is how I'm going to change today's society and how I'm going to addiction.
Wow.
And how incredible that my pain was coming from a journey I was walking with my father, but here I'm tying back to something him and I made together, that I was going to raise awareness on our, through our journey, but for so many other people through something him and I made together. So it was a very special moment that I'll never forget. I was by myself, but so it started out with, okay, how do I mass produce these bracelets? What does this mean? How are we doing this? And there was no charity that really stood for what I believed in, which I didn't really believe in being anonymous. And I didn't really believe in, staying quiet, because how are we supposed to help the majority of our people if, we can't show face and show up for ourselves and show up for them through honesty and pain and just be a good guide. So with that, then I was like, okay, well, I must start a 501c3. I must become a nonprofit now to really do what I believe we should do. So now what Rebel is we're creating awareness via social media globally, because this is a global problem. And now what I'm trying to do is raise enough funds where we can do statewide empowerment or statewide empowerment events, where we can go to each state, unite this community of people on a different level, in the sense of we're not going to meet in a room with chairs and coffee and talk about and sit in a circle. We're going to do something physical. We're going to get our endorphins going, and we're going to be healthy, and we're going to give people a healthy outlet, such as boxing or kayaking or hiking or painting or whatever it may be. We're going to unite this community in a healthy way. Yeah. And instead of feeling like we're sitting in a circle being the victim, we're not going to look at it that way. We're going to fight through it. We're going to face our biggest fears and become vulnerable in the sense of giving people a healthy outlet and allowing them to know how to deal with these emotions. So that's sort of where we're at now. So how do we do that? How do we bring this statewide? We're doing our first empowerment event this Saturday in Nashville, which we've only launched 3 months ago, and I can't believe we're already putting on our first event. And then, so on the sense of, okay, that's how we're going to bring empowerment, but now how do we become proactive? So reaching out to Big Brother, Big Sister, which is another nonprofit, to see if there's a way that we can tailor a mentorship program between the two of us to give to these children who need somebody. Right.
That's it's incredible what you said, because you covered a lot there as far as like the bracelets, first of all. I find that amazing. Just in life in general, isn't it amazing how things just kind of hit you like that? This is what we need to do. And a lot of times I personally would look at that as that's inspiration from a bigger place. And so I'm glad that you guys came. And I think that's a beautiful thing that you guys are doing. I've seen some of those bracelets, and go out and look for those for the people listening.
Oh my gosh, the people, I wish, my dad and I are not on speaking terms right now, which I've gotten to another place within to sort of just accept it right now. But I just wish that he could see how many people have been positively impacted by our story. And you know, we're not in a place that most people would look at as a positive place, but to generate, you know, our personal journey and create a light for other people, it's just really amazing.
Yeah.
It's really, it's amazing.
I love that you're doing that, because these are the things. America is such a great place, and certainly it's not the whole world, but we're kind of a beacon in a lot of ways to the world. And a lot of the great things of the last century, airplanes and the internet and TV, all these things that came about largely came from America. But at the same time, we have these unhealthy habits, both in eating and in there's addictive natures related even just to eating. So I love that what you're doing. You mentioned facing fears, and we talked about embracing pain, and just these real important things that people run from and then hide from with, oh, this is just my day-to-day grind, this is my job, so I'm just going to hide from this thing, and then I'll mask it in the evening by doing whatever, alcohol and drugs. So that's I can't
like reteaching. It's like re-identifying the word fight to people and allowing them to understand that fighting it could be a very positive thing for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned eating, and trying to introduce to our community, like, you have to do the work, whether it's being conscientious of what you're putting into your body as food, and just being physically active, and what you get out of that, the positivity that comes from within, is uncomparable. Like, it's a lot of people run to depression medicine because it's easy and it's plastered all over every single commercial that you see. But a lot of the stuff, I mean, generally speaking, can be with a little bit of work, self-work and self-love.
Yeah.
You can get there on your own.
Yeah. But it's so helpful in most cases, I think, to have a group cause, a kind of a support system, like it sounds like fostering with this whole thing, where people have kind of that support to fall back on, because they'll have their weak moments. They'll have their dark times where, oh, let me go watch this video or read this thing through Rebel or go to this event to give them that extra boost. And so, yes, people can, and it's important that they do it on their own, but Rebel is empowering. That's one of the words is the title of our podcast, empower, because it's such an important and powerful, if you will, word to be empowered personally, to know how to do that, and then ultimately get to a place where you're empowered enough to be somewhat self-sufficient. Just like you might take your kids' hands as they're, still young, but probably know how to walk by now, and you had to kind of take them by the hand to teach them that, as did I with my kids. But eventually you let them go and let them just walk on their own, and you watch and marvel from a distance.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I've and using that as sort of like a visual piece, I've seen other people who were in my shoes in the very beginning of realizing that they could take their journey and change their perspective a little bit and not become the victim. And there's one girl in particular where we've been in contact for, it's going on a year now, and she came up to me in tears, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you don't know who I am, but I heard of what you're working on, and my father," and she's sharing all this stuff with me, and how it has just completely turned her world upside down, and she didn't think that she could find positivity out of what she was going through.
Wow.
And to see her flourish on where she's at today in her life, I mean, oh my gosh, I still have my hard days, just because you're empowered and you find strength, but not every day is going to be easy.
No.
And I've gone to her for, this is where I'm at. Like, I just need somebody to talk to, and she's given me strength pieces, and I've left a conversation piece with her. It's like, okay, wow, I can look at this in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see these individuals that Rebel has like facilitated these conversations with people and allowed people to find strength within. Like, everybody has this inside.
Yes.
It's just allowing them to realize how to get there and hold their hand and guide them.
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes reminding, like you just said, everyone has this strength inside, reminding them and letting them know and helping them find that out for themselves. I love what you're saying there, and also admitting that you have your hard days as well, which is another reason for having a kind of a group of support, so to speak, for this whole kind of a system.
We just put a post up. Like, we're very social media adamant, because everybody is all over the globe with this. So how to reach people it's become that, which is really cool to have these platforms to allow us to reach Switzerland, Germany, wherever the case may be. Mm-hmm. But we just did a post on, what does healing look like to you? Does healing mean that every day is great, like once you're healed? No, that's not what it means. When you're walking alongside a loved one battling addiction, healing means that you know how to understand your bad days and what it takes to get through those days, and a healthy outlet, and to accept that it's going to happen, because you have triggers and you have emotions that are going to come from those triggers, and that's okay, and you have to accept that, and you can't be so hard on yourself, and just know that bad days will come, and that is in the process of healing, and that doesn't mean that you failed. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's been such a rewarding journey, and so many people come to me and just say, Aspen, because of you, I now feel like I have a purpose in my life. Because of you, I feel like I have a voice. Because of you, I feel like my dark past, there was a reason for that. And it's very difficult for me to accept those very gracious words, because I don't feel worthy for that. Because I've done nothing but share my journey and allow people to understand that they have it within themselves. It's already there.
Yes.
It's just, how do we ignite that empowerment? How do we allow people to tap into that emotion to know that they can do it too?
Yeah.
Because all I did was give this a title, which was Rebel. Rebel was already in existence before I was born. Rebel will be in existence when I'm gone. We will teach Rebel through our children. Yes. I've done nothing but give it a title. And so it's teaching these people that we can do this together. It is not one person. Yeah. You have it within yourself.
That's powerful.
It's been incredible.
Yeah, and what you're saying about Rebel existed before you were born, and again, I kind of have this school of thought that truth is just truth, and true principles of happiness, joy, success, and overcoming things like this, addictions and whatnot, are just principles that are somewhat unchanging for us as humans. And I love that you're kind of helping educate and foster these environments, these supportive environments for this particular. It's really a growing epidemic, and hopefully we can, with some of what you're doing and some other organizations, maybe kind of slow that down and stop and reverse even what's gone on, because it's horrible to see.
Can I share one more thing?
Please.
I'm sorry, I'm like going on little tangents over here.
No, you're fine.
I get very passionate on these conversations,
Please.
And it's been talking about the journey of Rebel and what it is today from where it started. It's been mind-blowing to the fact of people who are struggling with addiction have come to Rebel to hear the hurt from a family member's perspective without having to hear it from their family members, without having to hear it like, you've done this, all these fingers pointed at them. Mm-hmm. They can come to this community of Rebel and hear this hurt from a compassionate, loving place. Mm-hmm. And I had somebody reach out telling me that they were 60 days sober because of realizing the hurt that they put on their family without having to hear it from their family.
Wow.
If you can follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Instead of hearing their daughter point all these fingers at you, because they feel so much hurt and regret and shame from seeing that they failed their kid, that, gosh, how do you battle substance abuse when that's what you run to when you're in pain? But for them to be able to tap into our social media and read, like, I love them and I want to help them and I don't know how and I'm left feeling this way and I know they have so much good in them, and to hear it from a loving place has allowed people to recover. It's insanity to me.
Love
so
is.
Who knows what Rebel will become in a year from now, and what our audience will become.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, love is probably the most powerful thing in the universe when you think about it, and for people to be able to feel that and embrace that too is a real important part of this process, and any process of healing and recovery and reversal of bad habits and whatever it might be. And what do you have to say, Aspen, to addicts themselves and to those around them, family, friends, and loved ones? What do you have to say to addicts in particular with regards to all this?
Okay, so I'll use this question and speak on a personal note on behalf to what I would say to my father, and it would be that I know what he has deep down inside, and I know who he is, and I know who he can be, and regardless of what shame or embarrassment or what lies he wants to cover, just that all of that is gone in the sense of his recovery, and none of that matters in the sense of his recovery, because I know the strength that's there. And I always used to say as a child that my dad was my biggest hero.
Right.
I'm going to get choked up here.
Okay.
Because, you're in third grade, second grade, and people say, well, who's your hero? And typically you say one of your parents.
Right.
And I said it was my dad. And it dawned on me, my son, Hudson, who's 7, I asked him, I go, hey, buddy, who's your hero? Like, just having a conversation with him. And then in the midst of that conversation, I stopped dead in my tracks, and I realized that more so now than ever, my father truly is my hero. No matter where he's at within his addiction or recovery, he's the one who instilled this strong individual in me, and I wouldn't be who I am today without seeing where he's at and what he's taught me and who he's taught me to be in the midst of his battles. And I think people that struggle with addiction, I don't know, maybe not be so hard on themselves, on the pain that they may have caused, because the people on the other side, could still be looking at them in such a positive light. Yeah.
What perspective, though, that you're expressing right now, I love it because, and you're clearly a great person. Ray attested to this in our interview as well, and I can see it, and so can so many others. But it's such a great example, I think, as you're talking about your father, and he's still your hero, even with whatever pain that has come through that relationship as well, that he's still your hero. I just love you expressing that and the love that you still have there. And what else would you have to say to any of those surrounding this difficult topic where they have a loved one of whoever might be the addict, and they're watching in their own hell or pain from a distance or even close by in the same home as it might be? What do you have to say to those people?
I think that it's incredibly important for them to keep a good eye on where their addiction, the other person's addiction, is bringing them. to keep a good eye on their mental health and their mental stability, because at any point in time, loving an addict, it can break us. And if we aren't strong enough for ourselves, and if we can't love and be gentle on our own hearts, we can't be there for them and give them 100% of what we need to give them. And to also understand that having boundaries is very important. Whether you just have to understand what you're signing up for. And if it comes to a point where things are becoming too difficult for you to handle, to set those boundaries. They're very important. And even if that means you need to disconnect from that person until you can find yourself at a stable place again, with understanding where you're at and understanding where they're at, then that's okay too.
Yeah. Great. Setting boundaries, that's a real important part of that too. And I hear you expressing love there as well from these people around that. And that's one of the reasons they're experiencing, and in your case, that you experienced and continue in some ways experiencing pain surrounding this topic too, because there is love. It's a powerful thing.
Right. I think too that people need to understand that anger stems from love.
Yeah.
You love this person, and that's why you're angry, because you care.
Yeah. And I realize this Rebel for a Change is still relatively kind of in its infancy, but it's growing quickly into a beautiful thing, thanks largely to you and your leadership. What is your vision and legacy with this moving forward?
My vision is to change the world. I say that in a sense of like, I sort of laugh because I think people say that in a sense of like, they just say it, but I legitimately feel like if people can give us a chance to speak on behalf of loving an addict, we might be able to change the way today's society treats addiction.
Yeah. Well, clearly whatever we've been doing hasn't been working so far. And I, for one, like a lot of people, I think, believe in having a grand vision. Like Les Brown said, shoot for the moon, and even if you miss, you land among the stars. Having a high vision is a real important thing. So change the world, yes, that's general, but yes, I think some of what that means specifically too for you.
Right.
And I respect the heck out of that. So what else would you like to add? Because we'll wrap up here. But anything else you want to add? I know you have this event coming up. If you want to elaborate more on that as well.
Yes, our event. Oh goodness, it's in 3 days, and it'll be the first kickoff of the Love Club. Gosh, everything is surrounded by love. It's very interesting having this conversation with you because. It's funny because when I went to my attorney saying I need to start a nonprofit and explaining everything to him, he was like, well, Aspen, to prove to the IRS that you can be a nonprofit, it has to be more than just about love. And I just started laughing because, that's just, there's so much that goes with love. So it's called the Love Club, and it's going to be our first kickoff of really trying to allow people to get into a vulnerable place and face their biggest fears and fight it out and re-identify the word fight. And what's really cool is we're going to do an exercise in the beginning, give everybody a piece of chalk and write on their boxing bag. We're going to be doing it at Title Boxing Club in Cold Spring. Write on their boxing bag why they're fighting. And before they even unleash anything, what is at the surface of why they're fighting? Because typically anger and ego gets in the way, and you think you're fighting for one thing, but then once you strip it down and allow these individuals to fight and punch and feel this hurt to come out and actually visualize it. And then at the end of whenever we're all done boxing, to them then re-ask that question. So your answer that you placed on the bag, is that truly why you're fighting? Is that truly what's making your heart break? And it's allowing these individuals to sort of take a step back, strip all of the emotions, and answer the question in a very honest place.
Yeah.
So this will be our first one, and in hopes that we can get grants and bring in enough donations is to do a statewide tour. And like I said, not all of them will be in boxing facilities. We're just doing that because it's what I'm passionate about, and I want to kick off the first one. But we also have sponsors such as Grab the Gold and I Love Juice Bar. Or, sorry, yeah. I Love Juice Bar, sorry.
Yeah.
Grab the Gold and I Love Juice Bar, they're going to be sponsoring the event too. And it's, in a way, also reinforcing that what you put in your body is what you're getting out, and to bring strength and health and fitness and mental, and then leave it with a oh gosh, I'm so sorry, my head is
You're fine.
Taking a blank. Leave it with me and a motivational speaker to sit down and really allow these people to leave with key pointers on what they can do at home when they're facing these emotions that they don't know how to conquer.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It is interesting. You mentioned your attorney saying, "Oh, you can't have a nonprofit just based on love," because sometimes in our podcast I've mentioned that when we say this, "You are priceless." One of the things about that, I think back to the Beatles with the best things in life are free and all of that that we hear about, but when we say priceless, we literally mean above the monetary systems of this world, and that's what love is. That's what people are in general. That's what these relationships are. And so you talk about nonprofit. Well, in the terms of what the world standards are for money, it is above that. But yeah, I guess for legal purposes, those darn attorneys, you got to have something. But
I know. He was like, you need to put a business plan together. I'm like, what is happening? This is not about a business plan. This is about teaching people about love and empowerment, and vulnerability, and showing up for yourself. And so,
well, you're doing it.
But
you're doing it. As I see you move forward, I promise you, it'll unfold. Just like this whole bracelets thing just kind of jumped out at you. It'll unfold as you just keep plugging away and pushing forward. It'll unfold. There's some things that you may not be sure of yet. I'm confident will unfold properly, because this is a beautiful thing you're doing. And so there's, I think, positive energy and forces of the universe connected to what you're doing that are going to help you. That's just my own personal feeling. We'd love to team up with you in some capacity to think about some way we can do that. I'm on the West Coast. Maybe we come up with some events to do out here when you get to that place.
Great. We have a couple other little, not little, they're huge parts of Rebel that we haven't released yet. But one being the Fight for Happiness project, which Brian Welch was part of. And it's where we take boxing gloves and we dip it in paint, and we actually create art out of pain. And then it allows us to take a step back and look at how beautiful the fight is, because without fighting, you couldn't get to the pivotal moment to find joy. So there's that we'll be doing. And then there's also another part of Rebel called Hello, My Name Is, where Jay Weinberg, he's the drummer of Slipknot, he was the artist on that piece, and that's going to allow individuals from around the world to put their story from pen to paper and write it out. And there's so much healing that happens when you actually try to sit down and put to words what you feel. And so whatever happens on that piece of paper, whether it's tears, whether it's ripped up and taped back together, whether it's scribbled out or pictures drawn, we want these rebels to send it to us, our P.O. box, send it to us, and allow us to scan in their stories, which for me, it's like art on a piece of paper. Scan in their stories and put it on our social platforms. And these individuals can remain anonymous if they choose, but it allows them to see how other people can relate and unite to their dark moments, and allow other people to realize that there is hope for them too, because not everybody's going to be able to relate with me and my father, and vice versa. Some people have had horrific things happen to them, and I think that these journeys need to be shared so other people can understand that there's hope to get to the other side. So there's other parts of Rebel that, aside from the Love Club, aside from the empowerment events and the mentorship, there's so much still that we're going to be launching in the next coming. And we have featured Rebels. We have beautiful, like documentary style videos from influential people that individuals like to follow, that will be showcasing their stories and in their hometowns. And it's really cool what's to come. What we have out there right now is the utter beginning of what we're about to release.
Great. I love the vision, and I love everything you guys are doing. The bracelets, I mean, that's something that can remind anyone wearing them of any number of things, both from love to avoiding addictions, maintaining the right habits. Just everything you're doing, I think, is a beautiful, harmonious thing, supporting all the other pillars of this great organization. And I can't say enough about it, Aspen. We love what you're doing. We love you guys. And is there anything else you want to add?
I appreciate the time and the interest of even wanting to hear my journey. It's amazing to me that what was tears, and I cried a lot to now where people, I don't know, are really just showing up and want to hear more is beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah. Good. Well, so this event, when exactly is the event?
It's this Saturday, November 10th.
Okay.
It'll be our first one, and in hopes that we can generate enough funds. Our goal is to do a statewide empowerment tour.
Yeah, great. So this is in Nashville, and everyone can catch up on Instagram, Rebel for a Change, right? And Twitter. Are you on Twitter too?
We're on Twitter. Yep.
And Rebel for a Change.
Everything's honed in on Instagram, and then it filters into Twitter and Facebook. But everything is Rebel for a Change, and then we also have rebelforachange.com, which our shop is on there, so you can buy the jewelry, you can buy the empowerment pieces. We have t-shirts that'll be available soon, and 100% of the proceeds go right back into the nonprofit to allow us to do these events and create these support groups.
Great. Love it. Keep doing what you're doing. Let's follow up here, maybe do a sequel here on our interview and sometime down the road. And
I'd love to.
Yeah. And until next, this is what I tell my audience at the end. Until next time, everybody, empower yourself, empower the world around you. Thank you, Aspen.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for listening to Empower Humans. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review this podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit empowerhumans.com. We'll catch you next time.